Hey guys, welcome back to another GameSkinny Writer's Workshop. I don't know how many of you guys tuned in last night for our usual workshop time. I'm so sorry I wasn't able to make it. I was really sick. I did not want to leave you guys. I don't like canceling workshops. I like to be there when I say I'm going to be there, and I was really upset that it was something that I had to do, but I could not guarantee that I could even finish our stream. So I decided to push it to tonight. And I'm still not quite over the bug that I had, so workshop is going to be a little bit shorter than usual. And I think a lot of you guys are getting a little bit tired too, you know, during the winter. There's always that period around like the end of February, beginning of March, where you kind of start to get cabin fever, you want the weather to get a little bit warmer, and it's really easy to stagnate during that time, especially creatively. I know I have been, so that's why we'll be doing it. Will only probably be here about half an hour today, but I do have some exciting news to share with you guys at the end of the stream, so stick around. And this week you guys wrote about your characters, the characters that you play in your games, and the reason that I chose this particular topic is, you know, I have a lot of very close friends who aren't really a part of the gaming world, and we all do, of course. And the question that I get a lot, and I'm sure you guys too, is how you can invest so much time into something that isn't real, it's a simulated adventure, it's a game. And I think character has a lot to do with that. You know, maybe not so much for your first-person shooters or, you know, your MOBAs or stuff like that where you're doing missions, you're doing, you know, quick multiplayer stuff. That's a little bit different, but, you know, in some first-person shooters, you know, in the RPG world especially, in the MMO world especially, character is a really important thing, and it's a really important thing to a lot of us. We take our characters seriously. They're avatars through which we can have adventures that we wouldn't get to have otherwise. And it's also like a factor for immersion. We all look for immersion when we're in a video game, and character is just part of that. You know, being able to inhabit an avatar, a different person so completely that you can engage in this experience that the game developers want you to have. So character is really important to gaming, and I think character is really important to a lot of gamers. We get kind of attached to the characters that we create because we do spend a lot of time with them. We do have a lot of experiences, if you want to call them that. We do have a lot of experiences with them. And they can become kind of like our friends. They become very meaningful to us. They become very important to us. We get attached to them, and that's okay. It's the same, like, you get attached to your pets, you get attached to your characters, we get attached to all kinds of things. So that's something that I've really been thinking on this week, and it made me kind of want to get to know you guys, not just as gamers, but also as characters. And so I was kind of thinking about how, you know, I could do both of those in you know, one fell swoop, and this was it. So I had you guys write about yourselves, like, as characters, but writing about yourself in such a way that, like, the way that a game developer would write about you if you were to appear in a game, if you were an NPC instead of the playing character. And I gave you guys an example that I did for my MMO character. I always go by Catkin when I'm in MMOs. It's a minor character from one of my favorite books, and I like the sound of the name. So that's the name that I chose, and I made a little example for you guys there, but this particular workshop is not going to be very heavy on line edits, because this particular prompt, I know we kind of get into that sort of slump in the middle of winter, and it's hard to get the creative juices going, and sometimes you just need to flex your muscles without having to worry too much about form or structure or like any sort of complex technique. And so this was mostly just a creative exercise for you guys. after doing so many challenges, I mean, they are pretty frequent, to just kind of like relax a little bit and let your creative flag fly, or your freak flag, whatever. So that's mostly what this was just a creative exercise to keep that creative blood flowing, and so there's not going to be a lot of heavy line editing. And this week we are looking at just our challenge winner. I just picked one today because I don't feel personally comfortable in something like this, something that's so deeply personal, that's so specific, unique to an individual. I don't feel comfortable making lots of big structural changes. When stuff like this comes across the back end of our site, it's usually just a matter of tweaking spelling, tweaking grammar, tweaking things like that, because what we have here is something that's very, very rich in a particular writer's voice. And the article that we're looking at today is from a brand new writer on the site, so we're so happy to have him. And his name is Xanitos, or his username is Xanitos. And he is our challenge winner for this week, so congratulations to him. And he wrote about his character, Emperor, who he calls Emperor Xanitos. Now, he did a lot of great work with voice here, and if you remember me talking in the challenge article about voice is something that is absolutely unique to you as a writer. We all have different vocabularies, different ways that we like to structure sentences, different, like, I have certain punctuations that I'm really fond of, maybe that makes me weird, but we all have certain tics, we all have certain habits when we write, and all of those things kind of make up your voice. And a lot of us as writers don't actively recognize our own voice. We don't recognize our own patterns of speech, our own patterns of writing, but other people can, and that can be what helps really define you as a writer, is finding your voice. That sounds really cheesy, and it's not some like great epiphanic journey or anything about like finding your voice, but like knowing your voice, knowing your patterns, knowing your strengths, and then using them and honing them will really, really take you a long way as a writer. That is probably a conversation for a different day, because there are all kinds of ways to go about doing that, but voice is something that you're always going to have. You can't write without voice. There's not voiceless writing, unless it's technical writing like instructions and textbooks and things, but even then, there's just not voiceless writing in journalism, in fiction, in those areas. So the interesting thing about voice is that you can also change your voice. Fiction writers do this a lot. It's kind of like perspective, not quite in journalistic writing, but it's a little bit like perspective in fiction writing, in that you can change your voice to adapt to certain audiences, certain topics, and that's kind of what I asked you guys to do here, is to play around with your own voice and kind of try to match the voice of your article up with the voice of the kinds of games that your character is usually in. So for my character, for Catkin, I play a lot of MMOs, I play a lot of RPGs, so I wrote it a lot like what you'd find in a lore book, maybe, or what you might find in an NPC description. And Xanitos did exactly the same thing, but he took it just a step further. He actually, let's look at how he did this. So his article starts with this like pomp and circumstance and all this big hubbub, like all praise Emperor Xanitos, the first of his name, Lord of all things fluffy. It sounds like they're introducing a character from Game of Thrones. So that's a great way to grab a reader's attention. I saw it and I was like, ooh, this is really bold, this is different, this is something really creative, kind of outside of the box. And he cuts himself off and goes on to say, is he gone? Good. If I have to spout one more word about him. And what's interesting about this is that he's told you a lot already about his character without actually saying anything about his character. This third person narrator, we don't really know who it is, this just omniscient kind of person voicing this article, who usually we would say is just the author themselves, but with stuff like this, saying that is a little bit tricky. So, the narrator here has told us already that Sandy Toes is none of these things. He is not, well, maybe the first of his name, but Lord of all things fluffy, and that makes him sound like a pretty good guy. Probably not a pretty good guy. And that's what's really cool about this line, is that just saying, kind of sarcastically introducing a character like this, and then undercutting it with, oh, is he gone? Good. Now I can share my honest opinion. That says a lot without ever actually saying anything. It says that, Zanny Toes is probably someone that you should be afraid of. Probably kind of a mean guy. Probably not the kind of dude that you want to be friends with. But also probably not the kind of dude whose path you want to cross. So, that was a really good job, and I was really, really impressed with that, because that's something that even in fiction workshops, which I have also taught, we have harped on, and some people just don't quite get it. So there's a ton of creative stuff happening, like all through here. There's a lot of really creative language. Let's look at this paragraph here. This one was my favorite one. Because when I had this challenge in mind, when I was writing the article, when I was thinking about what my own example would look like, this is exactly what I had in mind for you guys to do. This is what I was imagining in my head when I was wondering what these challenge articles would sound like. He writes, Zanny Toes isn't one for fighting. Rather, he prefers to influence events from behind the scenes. Sitting in his swivel chair, his silver tongue is capable of turning friend against friend, and, on one occasion, has caused the death of an entire raiding party. This is what happens when you don't let Zanny Toes join you for a spot of dragon slaying. When adventuring, he's fine going solo or taking a few close followers with him. Just be ready to put up with his stories. And see, we learned so much about that character just from this one tiny paragraph, and I'm not going to go through like point by point and say we learned A this way, we learned B this way. But you can kind of see how he really, really gets deep into that voice there, kind of roots into it, and goes for broke. And I can't spot one point in here where I think I'm hearing the writer's voice instead of like this persona's voice. And it was very much the same throughout. That is, until we get to, I have to go over here, the very last paragraph. Now, when you're writing in a voice, whether it's your own or whether it's something that you're adapting as kind of a persona, the one thing you have to really be careful of, and this is something I have to harp on all the time, not usually in journalism, but in fiction workshops I harp on it all the time, about consistency. Consistency is more important, or almost more important than anything else. In some cases it will be the most important thing in your writing. And consistency just means, it can mean a lot of things, but in this case, when I say consistency, I mean that your voice, the persona that you adopt, should be strong and like confident and consistent from the opening paragraph until your closing paragraph. And Zanny Toes had a great voice going on until that last paragraph. And last paragraphs are tricky. Concluding paragraphs are just as important as opening paragraphs, but they're a lot harder to write, in my opinion, because you've said everything you need to say, and writing anything else after that just kind of feels like you're repeating yourself. And it can get really frustrating to try and come up with a creative way to end an article and also not repeat any information and not repeat your introduction and not like just kind of cut it off in a weird spot. And conclusions, you're gonna hate me for saying this because I know I say it in workshops all the time. They take practice. most things in writing are just a matter of practice. I wish it were different. I wish I could tell you a secret that would fix it for you forever, but I can't. So, it's something that you just kind of have to make a couple mistakes and figure it out. But let's look at what he had as his last paragraph. He talks in the next to last one about his fighting style, what he does if he is forced into battle and can't swivel in his chair. He says, well, that about covers it. If you are actually able to sit through this, give yourself a pat on the back. You deserve it. Now, if you'll excuse me, the Emperor is requesting a team deathmatch. Now, that's a fine conclusion. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But for me, when I see that, and you'll start to pick up on this, as you pay more attention to your writing, you also pay more attention to things as you read, whether they're yours or not. And you'll become more sensitive to things like this. So when I see this last paragraph, there's nothing wrong with it. But in my head, I'm thinking, okay, that's good. But it sounds like the voice is starting to get a little dismantled there. It sounds like he got to the end of this paragraph right here, couldn't quite figure out what else he wanted to say, and then just kind of rushed off with this. So the reason that I'm addressing this is because I've said a couple minutes ago that conclusions are very, very important to your article, and even though a lot of readers aren't going to stick with you to the end, that's the sad truth of the internet, you know, the ADD, the internet ADD. Most readers don't go past the first 50% of a page, which is sad, and it's probably not fair to us as writers, but that's how the information age works. We want to get as much information as fast as we possibly can, and so we don't always spend time on like the last half of an article, which could make a conclusion seem even more unnecessary, even more irrelevant. But I promise you that having a good conclusion is really gonna pay off for those readers who do stick with you to the end. Because the ones who stick with you to the end are the ones that you really want to reward. And if they go with you all the way to the end of that article, and then it's kind of got a lackluster ending, or it's got a flat out bad ending, it's kind of upsetting. You know, even though you're just reading something and you can be like, oh, well, that wasn't a great ending, and just kind of move on, it's still, not only does it disappoint your reader, but it kind of reflects on you as a writer. Like, even if you were consistent from point A to like all the way almost to point B, if you miss point B, if you kind of start to like change it up there, then it's just, I don't know how to say what it is. We'll move on. That's okay. Thoughts get lost. It happens. So think about it like the ending of a book, or the ending of a movie, or the ending of a game. If you get all the way to the end of something, and then it's just kind of meh, you kind of get upset. Like, I've invested this time, I've invested this effort, and you are not going to provide quality content from, like, top to bottom. That's really upsetting. Your reader deserves better than that, and as a writer, you owe it to yourself to be better than that. So, even when it doesn't seem important, even when it seems irrelevant, always write good conclusions, because you never know who's sticking with you to the end, and you really don't want to disappoint them. So, let's look at what we could possibly do to this conclusion here to kind of beef it up a little bit. Now, there are lots of different ways people choose to end articles. Some people just kind of like find a nice place to just taper off, and that's fine, as long as it doesn't feel like the article ends prematurely. That's usually an okay thing to do, especially with shorter news articles. But with things like reviews, with things like op-eds, and a lot of your culture articles, you're going to want to have something at the end that kind of like ties everything together, wraps everything up and answers any questions, kind of provides any extra little tidbits that you need. And it is, as I've said, difficult to do that without kind of repeating yourself, and the first several times you do it, you will feel like you're repeating yourself. But it also helps to remember that by the time your reader gets to the conclusion, they've probably forgotten a lot of what you've said in the introduction, which is exactly why it's there, to just kind of remind them of the content that they've been through already. So, here is the change that I made. We're still sitting in the back end of the site. Here's the change that I made. Instead of choosing to go back to the original, I don't want to call it a frame. Instead of just going back to this sort of commentary on the commentary, I guess, just the sort of break in here, the sort of aside, that just felt a little bit jarring to me. I decided to maintain that lore feel, that NPC description feel, all the way to the end of the article, and then just kind of cut it off in a spot that felt natural, where I'm not summing anything up, I'm not repeating anything, I'm not doing anything like that, but it just, things are wrapped up in a nice enough way that the reader is okay leaving the article at this point, and that's what you want. You don't necessarily have to wrap everything up, answer every question. You don't have to do that. You can't. You just can't. All you want is to lead your reader to a place where they can safely, step out of your article. And not feel, jolted or jarred or disoriented. So what I did, was make this change. I don't know, since I don't know Xanitos, I've never played Xanitos, I've never met Xanitos. I did the best I could. Of course, the author is always going to be able to do a better job than I can at describing his own character. But I did the best I could with the material that I was, what I was able to gather about this guy from the preceding paragraphs, and I said, Xanitos makes himself seem like an amiable guy, but adventurers beware, he is vicious. Should you happen across him, do not engage in battle unless you're well prepared, preferably with a few allies, and do not trust him, or you might become dragon fodder. Now, the reason I chose to end on that line is, or on this paragraph, I could say, it's because it kind of turns it outward to the reader a little bit. That's something that a lot of writers will do in conclusions. They will take whatever they were talking about and they'll just turn it outwards. They direct it at their reader a little bit more. And it's a very clever trick because it not only it's not only a good way to end, I mean, just stylistically, but it can also, if you ask questions, a lot of people, especially on our site, will ask a question like, what games are you looking forward to, or what games do you think should have been on this list? Leave a comment below. That's a perfectly fine thing to do, and it's a great way to encourage reader interaction with you and with the site. So that's a perfectly valid option. I chose not to do that here because I didn't feel like it fit, but I did still kind of try to turn what's being said back out to the audience a little bit. And it's a very subtle thing, and this will take practice for you guys to be able to do. It's this line right here. Adventurers beware. If you're reading this, then you are clearly the adventurer who is reading about this character, so you should beware. And then I just kind of closed it off, wrapped it up, rounded everything off with this little joke. I think it's funny, maybe it's not. Well, kind of funny. So, I ended with this joke that is a reference to this line right here. This is what happens when you don't let Xanitos join you for a spot of dragon slaying. So, you can kind of make inside references to yourself. That's perfectly fine, especially if the article is a little bit shorter and a little bit more contained. That's a perfectly okay thing to do. And it just, you don't have to always end on a humorous note. That's not what I'm saying here, but it is just a nice way to kind of round off and I hate calling it End with a Bang, because I have heard that so much, it's been hammered into my head. It's kind of like ending with pizzazz, I suppose. That is a wonderful word. Is ending with pizzazz. So that's really, aside from a couple of like minor line edits, grammatical tweaks, that's really all that I needed to do this article, which is great, and that's exactly why it's a challenge winner, because if I could only find one thing to nitpick about, then you're doing a pretty good job. Because I, as an editor, am often very nitpicky, because that's how I am with my own writing, so that's just, I try not to be that way with you guys, but sometimes it happens. So, before I let you guys go, I do have one more announcement. Last week, when we were doing, well, during our last stream, not last week, during our last stream, I got asked if it would be possible for us to put together, like, a Skype chat or, like, Google Hangouts for all of the writing workshops participants to talk to each other, to talk to me, and I thought that was a great idea, and I've been wanting to do something like that with you guys, so I just went ahead and took that project underway. Let me close this tab that I'm not going to use now. And I have made this for all of you. This is the new GameSkinny Writers Workshop Gamer Launch site. Now, if you're not familiar with Gamer Launch, Gamer Launch is the sister sort of parent company to GameSkinny. They do all kinds of guild websites, clan websites, team websites. This is their homepage that you're seeing right now. A lot of MMO players, MOBA players. We are the official sponsor of Smite. And we have a ton of great resources over at Gamer Launch, and if you haven't checked it out, you definitely should. You can build your own website for your guilds, your clans, or other community websites that are gaming related. So for you guys, I went ahead and built a GSWW Gamer Launch website. It's still kind of under construction, so if you guys could bear with me while I get all those kinks sorted out and everything kind of finalized, I would so deeply appreciate that. Oops. This site is mostly meant for you guys to be able to interact with each other, to interact with me, keep up with news, keep up with events, find past challenges, you'll be able to see past workshops. So, what we have so far, this is your homepage, and you'll see, you know, when your next, right here, when your next challenge is going live. Sometimes there will be a countdown timer, the widget doesn't always work. We have this announcement here about, yay, new site. Over here on the side of the homepage, we've got our forums, and there is an event list down here. And we have gaming news on the side, just in case you guys need a little bit of inspiration for your writing, or you're just, you know, kind of interested. So over here in the forums, I've gone ahead and added several forums and then several topics inside of those forums. So the main one, news and announcements, that's where I will be announcing new challenges, I will be announcing workshop streams, that's where I'll make also announcements about important, like, GameSkinny site stuff, if a workshop needs to be changed or moved, or hopefully this never has to happen, canceled. That will all be in news and announcements, and it will of course feed to the homepage right here. You'll have to forgive my kind of slow internet since I am streaming at the same time that I'm doing this. Down here we have the general inquiries and FAQ. And most of you probably won't need this. This is mostly for new people who happen to stumble across the site. That's just where you can ask all your questions. The FAQ is already up. Anything that you're kind of curious about, I'm checking that pretty much daily. So anything that you need to know about, want to know about, just pop it in there and we'll get back to you. Writing tips is the next one. I have already filled out a couple of posts with resources that we have over on the GameSkinny site. Like a grammar guide. I cannot talk today. A grammar guide that addresses common errors that we find in writing all the time and how you can avoid those. We have a recommended reading list for writers, and then we have this super helpful, and I highly suggest that you guys go check it out because it's pretty amazing. Is everything you need to know about writing for GameSkinny. Now, this link right here will probably teach you more than I ever possibly could if you take the time to go through it. So, this link, I'm just gonna go ahead and follow it so I can show you guys. Our senior editor, Jay, recently went through and gathered all the content that our editors and our staff have ever written about how to write and how to use the site. And all of that got compiled into this mega list, like this huge list of all the resources that we have. And you can see, this is a ton of articles. This is more content than I could ever use. And there's a ton of stuff here, like how to embed videos and tweets in articles, how to use how you can or should use profanity in articles. Let's see, what else do we have? How to proofread your work, weird punctuation things, weird grammar things, how to structure sentences, how to write reviews, how to interview people, write long form articles, or like tag your content. There's all kinds of stuff that will not only make your writing better, but that can actually make your articles perform better in search engines, get more views, just make you overall more successful as a writer for our site. So I really, if you do nothing else, please go check that out because that is amazing. There is so much stuff there. Jay worked really hard on it. Our staff worked really hard putting all that content together for you guys because all we really want is to see you succeed. And that is a great place to start if you're feeling stuck or if you have questions. So other than that, our last two forums, we have a suggestion box, which is pretty self-explanatory, and then a meet and greet, which I will be filling out later, where it's mostly just so you guys can introduce yourselves, or introduce your characters. You can look for groups. There will be a looking for group thread. There will be group threads, community threads. It's just a place for you guys to talk to each other. You can start threads about stuff that's completely unrelated to gaming if you want. Talk about movies, talk about books, talk about I don't know, food, whatever. That is totally up to you guys to use however you want to use it, with respectfully, of course. So over here in challenges, we just have, this is where we're going to start archiving all of our previous challenges, so you can just kind of go back and look. Workshop videos will be embedded here, and as you can see, if you happen to be on the site while a live stream is happening, there will be a live stream here that you can just conveniently click on, and it will take you right to that stream so you can tune in. And the very last thing over here is probably the most important one, our calendar. Let's fast forward a month. So if you look at our calendar, you can see when every Monday all those new challenge articles coming out on Mondays, and then there are all the dates for our live stream on Wednesday nights. So if you're ever forgetting, like if you ever forget a stream or forget an article, or if you're wondering, if you're not sure, you can always pop on the site, check our calendar, and it'll tell you. So there will also be a link to this I will leave a link in chat, and I will also leave a link in the video descriptions for the archive on YouTube and on the site. But for those of you who want to visit, it's real easy, GSWW.gamerlaunch.com. Now, when you go here, what I want to see you guys do is click right over here, this little write with us thing, that's where you apply for membership. You have to apply for membership to start posting on the site, using the forums, commenting on things. And it's really easy. I did not make it a hard application. It's gonna ask for, I believe, it's gonna ask for your name. It will ask for your Skype. You don't have to put that in there if you don't want to. It will ask for your name. It'll ask for your Skype. I'm asking for Skype because I plan on starting a group Skype chat for the writer's workshop, just for any questions that come up through the week as you're writing that people maybe aren't getting to on the forums, for writing emergencies, for site questions, stuff like that. I just want you guys to have as many lines of communication as possible with me as we dig deeper and deeper into workshops. So it will ask for Skype name. It will ask for your email. We're not going to spam you with email, I promise. We do have a mailing list that we'll use to send out challenge articles and challenge reminders, but other than that, we do not spam you with emails, and you don't even have to get those. That's not what we're using your email for. We just want to have it kind of as part of our roster, and if you want to sign up for the mailing list, there is a link over here in the forums, actually right here, in the everything you need to know about the GameSkinny writing workshop. You will find a link to our mailing list there. So we are not going to make you sign up for that against your will. So keep an eye on this, and again, bear with me because it is still under construction. And that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for sticking with me and putting up with me being sick. It means a bunch to me, and thanks to all of you who wrote this week. Loved reading your content, and always have a blast editing it. You guys are wonderful. And congratulations to Xanitos for being our challenge winner this week. And let me check our calendar, our handy dandy calendar, and we will see that your next challenge article is coming out at the very beginning of this month. It's coming out on Monday the 2nd. So keep an eye out for that, and that means that your next workshop stream is Wednesday night, the 11th, at our usual time, 9 p.m. EST. And I'm hoping that I'll actually be able to be there this time. I'll be alive and well, would be nice. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye on the site and on GameSkinny.com for any updates, any news, and as always, I will see you guys next time.